Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Boost Your Pest Control Program for Citrus, Tree Nuts, and Vegetables, presented by Valent USA, which develops and markets products that advance sustainable agriculture, protect crops, enhance crop yields, and improve food quality. I'm Larry Ellard, the Custom Content Editor for Meister Media Worldwide, the publisher of American Fruit Grower and American Vegetable Grower magazines, and I'll be monitoring the webinar. In this webinar, you'll learn how to boost your pest control program for citrus, tree nuts, and vegetables. The expert speakers from Valent USA will discuss navigating tough pests like California red scale in citrus, mealybugs and scales in tree nuts, and aphids and whiteflies in vegetables. They will also talk about how Senstar insecticide brings two effective modes of action for long-lasting control of these soft-bodied insects at all life stages, including eggs and crawlers. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our two speakers. Allison Walston is the Product Development Manager for Insecticides at Valent USA. She is a graduate of the University of Kentucky, where she earned a bachelor's degree in agricultural biotechnology, and the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she earned a master's degree in entomology. Also speaking is Todd Berkdahl, Field Market Development Specialist for Valent USA. Todd's career in agriculture has spanned 3 decades, with roles ranging from biologist to agricultural production finance manager to market development specialist. Todd also worked in Thailand for 8 years in relief and development. He earned a master's degree in plant science from California State University, Fresno. Now I'm going to turn it over to Allison to begin the webinar. Allison?
Thank you, Larry. So good morning, everyone. We're going to get started, and as you can see, these are our introductions. These are our speaker slides, and then we'll get right into the insecticide that we're talking about today, which is Senstar. And what Senstar is it insecticide that has 2 effective modes of action that provide long-lasting control and targets soft-bodied insects. It controls all life stages, including eggs, crawlers, and it impacts other adult stages. It provides dual systemic activity, so it's moving up and down within the plant. It also has translaminar movement. So if you spray the top of the leaf, the product will move to the bottom of the leaf where some of those pests like to hide out. And then we'll also discuss the minimum impact to beneficial insects. So you may see in some of our marketing tools across magazines and different promotional materials, you can see this cute little Senstar rocket blasting off to boost your pest control program. And so how does Senstar do that? Well, we have 2 IPM-friendly active ingredients. One is spirotetramat, which is in the IRAC Insecticide Resistant Action Committee Group 23, which inhibits acetyl-CoA carboxylase. Then we've also got pyriproxyfen, which is in the IRAC Group 7C, which is a juvenile hormone mimic insecticide and part of the insect growth regulators. So these 2 active ingredients do complement each other in this formulation of Senstar. And so what we have is a table pointing out that what active ingredient brings to the table. So first, pyriproxyfen, it has more contact activity. So if you hit the insect pest that you're trying to control, pyriproxyfen is going to help with that. Pyriproxyfen also has true ovicidal activity. So when applied to the eggs absorb that and the eggs no longer hatch. The spirotetramat component has both xylem and phloem mobile, so it provides the systemic nature of that part of Senstar. Both spirotetramat and pyriproxyfen have translaminar activity, so if you apply it to one side of the leaf, it'll move to the other side of the leaf. And then for both insect growth regulators, the speed of control is good. It's not a knockdown material in 1 to 3 days, but you do see, with the added benefit of the two of them together, a little bit faster than each one is alone. So as I mentioned, the two active ingredients for Senstar insecticide is a combination of pyriproxyfen and spirotetramat. They're two different modes of action, so represented by 7C and group 23. As we've talked about the modes of action as the insect growth regulator, which is a juvenile hormone mimic, pyriproxyfen component is telling the insect to basically stay forever young. It keeps producing juvenile hormones so they do not molt to the next stage. Where the spirotetramat component, which is inhibits lipid synthesis and growth regulation, so therefore it's also not molting into the next stage because the lipids aren't there to make up its cellular membrane. And so what we've done, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, is formulated it into a suspo emulsion, which is a new type of formulation, and that's where these two active ingredients can play nicely together. And so it's been specifically formulated for that exact purpose. Senstar is registered in all states, including California. So some of the crops that we're going to be talking about today are highlighted here in yellow, and these are the ones also registered in California. You do want to make sure that you read and follow the label at all times. There are some subgroup crops that are not labeled in California, and then we've also got some suppression claims on the label as well, as you can see by the thrips category and the little asterisk there saying that Senstar primarily suppresses the larval form of the thrips. So we've got aphid and whitefly control, which we'll be talking a lot about today. We'll talk about psyllid control in citrus and some of the different rates and methods on how to best control the pests in these crops, such as brassicas, bulb vegetables, leafy vegetables. And then on the next slide, we have citrus and tree nuts. And with citrus and tree nuts, we're getting a little more of the insect pests, such as mealybugs, scales, and psyllids. So how does Senstar insecticide work? So as I mentioned about the pyriproxyfen, these populations are impacted once the insects come in contact with the pyriproxyfen or feed on the treated plant. As I said, it has translaminar activity, so once it starts to feed on the leaf tissue or something like that, it's exposed to the pyriproxyfen. And pyriproxyfen mimics this juvenile hormone that disrupts the insect development. So instead of the insect molting to the next stage, it just stays in that younger stage and then can no longer develop and just basically ends, and that is how it's controlled. Any eggs that are contacted with pyriproxyfen will not hatch, and then any adults, specifically the females that are exposed to pyriproxyfen, it disrupts their fertility, and they are mostly sterile and no longer viable eggs or do not have any crawler hatch. For spirotetramat, the spirotetramat that you're applying into the orchard or the field is not the actual active ingredient that is impacting the insect. What happens, and a lot of times you have to have foliage and absorptive materials on the plant to absorb it and break down that initial spirotetramat into the metabolites. And these metabolites are what provide the insecticidal properties. So that can take up to 7 to 10 days for spirotetramat to become effective. And that's one of the good parts of the Senstar is that the pyriproxyfen there is immediately working and impacting the insects, while the spirotetramat tends to take a little longer to break down into those metabolites. So spirotetramat also reduces the egg laying in females, and that creates lower populations, and it's very active on immature and adult growth stages. So I mentioned that this is a unique formulation, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So it's called a sespo emulsion, and what this happens is pyriproxyfen is more on the oil side of things and likes to play in that realm. Spirotetramat is more aqueous and does better in water. And so when you have oil and water, you have to make an emulsion. And so this sespo emulsion keeps both of those active ingredients in this liquid form, and it also stabilizes and prevents any antagonism between the two ingredients. And then it delivers the ratio of both active ingredients so that they're effective in each regard. It prevents any potential poor tank mixing issues by having this specially formulated. And we have seen no phytotoxicity with Senstar on any crop. So it is it's safe on your crops. All right, so now we're going to get into what Senstar can do by each crop. So I'll be giving, as the nerdy entomologist, I'll be giving a little overview on some of the insects that we're targeting, and then Todd's going to take it over and talk about timing and efficacy. So first up is citrus. So one of my favorite insects to work with and especially control are armored scale. And one example is the California red scale, which you have in citrus. And so once these scales get their armor over top of them, which is a hard coating exoskeleton, it's very hard to control them. But when you have Senstar, you're having multiple routes to get to them. So you want to target immature stages. I find that tends to be one of the better application methods, either targeting the crawler stages, or we like to target the black cap stage right before they start to turn into adults. If you do hit an adult with Senstar, this reduces the live crawlers or the offspring that the females can produce. And without controlling these scales can just suck plant juices, they can get on the fruit, and even on the tree, they can cause a lot of injury, damage, and eventually kill the tree. So severe infestations can kill limbs and trees. They can reduce yield. You're not getting as much photosynthesis or fruit production. You can result in tree death. And then in some instances, you can get spotting on the fruit from the feeding damage. Our next pest that we're going to be talking about is the Asian citrus psyllid. And so these are little psyllid creatures. The little nymphs get a lot bigger, and then they turn into the adult. The adult is winged and can move around, is quite motile. The eggs and the nymphs are kind of a yellowish orangey color. They love brand new flushes of leaf tissue and love to feed on that leaf. And so having two active ingredients that are right there for them to feed on is really good for control. And of course, Asian citrus psyllid transmits a bacterium hunglong bean organism, and that can cause citrus greening, which is detrimental to the citrus industry, leading to decline and death of the trees. The fruit becomes bitter and not marketable, and the trees eventually begin to die. And so here is a little snapshot of what the label for citrus on Senstar looks like. We've got the entire crop grouping, group 10. The use rates are 16 to 20 fluid ounces. The target pests are scales, psyllids, aphids, mealybugs, and leaf miners. We have ground application. For adjuvants, you want to avoid using a sticker type of adjuvant. These sticker adjuvants don't allow for the penetration or absorption into the leaf tissue. So using a type of spreading or penetrant type of adjuvant is more optimal for Senstar. I also like horticultural mineral oils. You want to make sure that for best management practices that you're rotating your modes of action to other modes of action. For re-entry intervals in citrus, it's 24 hours, and the PHI is 1 day before harvest. And then we recommend a 200 gallon per acre application volume, or anywhere you can modify that based on the size or the age of the trees. But you definitely, when you're targeting these little creatures that like to hide in the nooks and crannies, you want to get good coverage. So I'm going to hand it over to Todd now, and he's going to talk about timing for Senstar in citrus.
Thank you, Allison. As you may know, citrus has several pests. Probably the dominant pest is citrus red scale. And for years we used the steam, and that was a very effective tool going back to, I think, 1998. As far as the timing, we want to time when the pest is there. You got a contact material and a systemic product working in concert together to control these pests. So if you look at these slides here, the March, April, May timing is probably the middle of the road, but it's also the best timing right at petal fall. The spirotetramat component needs to get into the tree and then break down, as Allison iterated in previously. And so at the same time, the pyriproxyfen, you need to get good coverage. So I recommend that May, right after petal fall timing for these pests in California. In Florida, you've got a year-round problem with the Asian citrus psyllid. We all have heard how the Florida citrus industry has been devastated by this pest. And there's lots of tools out there to control it. It's not really a hard pest to control. Senstar does control it effectively. So we're recommending either February, March timing or in May, June, and July in the middle of summer there. You don't want to make more than one application during the primary citrus bloom period. Okay, so that's key. As far as the control of red scale, this was trials that were done all over the place. This was actually done in here locally with me in Central California. We typically target the first crawler stage around the first part of May, and then the second crawler stage in June. And historically, we used the steam for that second crawler stage, and it took out anything that was already in the trees, and then it stopped the process or put a hindrance on the biology of citrus red scale going forward, so you get to harvest with clean fruit. So we've actually went out with two different treatment regimes here, and as you can see, the Senstar compared to Movento and compared to straight steam does a very good job of controlling citrus red scale. And this is an example. This is what I would expect across the board. This product is dependent upon coverage. So Movento coverage is key with getting the product into the plant. Well, pyriproxyfen is even more key because of the contact nature of its insecticidal property. If you look at Asian citrus psyllid, this was looking at 7, 14, and 21 days after treatment. Again, the Senstar performing very well compared to Movento. Actually, this is just a straight shot up with Movento. Looking at the comparison at 21 days, it's outperforming everything out there. This is the control of the actual eggs with Senstar. Again, the pyriproxyfen component, the spirotetramat component doesn't have any activity on eggs, but the pyriproxyfen component is a very good ovicide, as well as causing the females to lay sterile eggs as well. So you look at the amount of eggs out there under pretty high populations. This was an example of 10 shoots that were sampled, and well in excess of 150 to 175 eggs per shoot. And you see the Senstar significantly reducing the amount of eggs being laid, or viable eggs. And the control of the nymphs, again, the same, basically the different picture, but the same trend. Just devastating the population with the Senstar compared to untreated, obviously compared to Movento as well. If you look at Asian citrus psyllids adults, here are the pyriproxyfen component. I just want to reiterate that it doesn't really going to kill the adults, but it's going to have activity on those nymphs. The spirotetramat component does have activity on the adults as they feed. They ingest the ketol and enol breakdown products, and it causes toxicity through the stopping or stifling of lipid production. Citrus leaf miner is considered a minor pest, but it can be if it's treating for everything else. It can usually be controlled. But we wanted to look at it as well, looking at 3, 8, 15, and 21 days after treatment. You see the number of leaf miners on 10 shoots being significantly reduced by Senstar compared to the Movento, and of course the untreated was there were several per shoot, over 40. So this is kind of a gimme for citrus leaf miner. You can target citrus red scale, or at the petal fall period, maybe it's thrips, and then you're going to pick up the leaf miner as well. Here's another shot of leaf miners, live leaf miner larva. Okay, again the same trend. We get a downward trend of very significant control of leaf miner with Senstar. I talked about coverage. Allison talked about it. This is just as a reminder. You need to get good coverage with this product. You've got a contact material as well as a systemic product, a systemic active going onto the trees or whatever crop it may be. This is not specific to citrus. It's basically across the board. We did this. I did this years ago, and it's very telltale. You put spray cards in the tree. They're water sensitive spray cards. And then we actually sprayed this at 150 gallons per acre at 1.5, 2.5, and 3.5 miles per hour. And you see the difference. The bluer the card, the more water, the more spray got on the trees. So going slow gets better coverage. The whole gist of this is that slow down, go slow. Speed does not kill. Going slow will greatly enhance the results of Senstar's activity when you're using it. Additional ideas is to target immatures, the early stages, crawler stage for red scale, right at petal fall for thrips. So again, that early May or mid-May timing in California is a good time, and in Florida that's going to be a little bit more expanded. You got the February, March, and then in the summer as well. The other thing is that when you're spraying pyriproxyfen, or when you're spraying Senstar, which has a pyriproxyfen component, pyriproxyfen is very effective on controlling ants. We have an ant bait called Esteem Ant Bait, which we use across the board in tree nuts and citrus and grapes. And what we're seeing is a significant reduction in the amount of ants. In fact, complete stoppage of the foraging with ants after we've sprayed Senstar. 7 to 10 days after the application, the ants are no longer to be found. So what's happening there is you're spraying the pest, you're spraying the scale, or in some cases maybe mealybug, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And you're putting that pyriproxyfen onto their bodies, you're spraying it onto the trees, you're spraying the ants themselves, and then any exudates, like for mealybugs, you get a honeydew, a real strong honeydew, and on scale as well, but not as pronounced as with mealybugs. And that honeydew is the ants are feeding on and foraging and basically farming those pests is contaminated with pyriproxyfen. So you've actually created a very effective Esteem Ant Bait by spraying Senstar onto the trees. You don't want to use any stickers. You want to use a spreader, something that's going to allow this product to spread out and get all over the fruit, the tissue that's been sprayed. If it's sticker, it holds it on the top, and you want the product to be translaminar. So don't use a sticker, just use spreaders. Or as Mallison mentioned, you can use oil, which is very popular, especially the citrus Omni oil or 415 oil. So I'm going to get into tree nuts now. Big crop for those of you listening from California. Almonds and pistachios are probably dominant. We know what's happened to the walnuts here lately, but that's a different story. So we get into tree nuts, how to use it. Basically, it's good for the whole crop group of tree nuts. It controls aphid, scale, and mealybugs. We don't have an aerial label, and again, I emphasized in the previous slide about coverage. So when trees are leafed out, going by aerial is not going to be conducive. So we don't have an aerial label. It's only by ground for tree nuts. The rate's 12 to 18 ounces per acre. And again, if you're going preventatively, you can probably go in that mid rate. If you've got a lot of pests out there, I would stick with a higher rate, bigger dose for a higher infestation. You don't want to target this pest with the same mode of action. So Allison did mention that we've got a group 23 and a group 7C insecticide here. And so you don't want to rotate with another group 23 or a group 7C. So ensure that the modes of action that you're using are not in the same group. They are opposites or different groups so that you don't run the risk of creating resistance from an IPM standpoint. There's a 21-day pre-harvest interval for anybody who's coming up against harvest and sees pests, and then a 24-hour re-entry period. The gallonage, which we're recommending, is anywhere from 100 to 400 gallons per acre. However, I would say use the least amount of gallonage, but ensuring the best coverage. So if you have to go to 400, that's fine. The product works well. We've tested it. We tested it at 2 and 400 on walnuts and on almonds and on pistachios, and we saw really no difference in efficacy. Wind coverage was adequate. We had really good coverage when we spray at those rates. So slow down. You can use the lower volume by slowing down and getting good coverage, and you'll be a lot happier with the results. No more than 18 ounces per acre per application. So you can make 2 applications a year. However, I don't think it's going to be required if you get good coverage on the first application. All the trials that we have conducted in the last 4 or 5 years, single application was basically, with good coverage, was basically lights out for these pests. And then you don't want to use more than 36 ounces. So 2 applications of 18 ounces each. As far as the timing goes, because you have a systemic product that needs to be uptake into the plant, you need to have the trees not being in the dormant period. This does have pyriproxyfen in it. Some of you may know that as a steam, which we used to use it as a dormant application. You don't want to use Senstar dormant because you would be wasting the spirotetramat component. So you want to spray it when the trees have leafed out and when the pests are visible. So for pistachios, I'm thinking right around the first week in May after fruit set. You could go all the way to July, but I would say get them early before they cause the damage. Once you see the pests, or if you have a history in the field of Gill's mealybug, which is the target pest for pistachios, spray it when you see it, and typically it'd be right after fruit set when the nuts are starting to grow in those clusters. For scale, the same deal. April, May, you could probably target the mealybug and get the scale as well with that application. And for walnuts, for scale, I would say after they've leafed out, you've got a definite fruit set out there, and you start to, if you've got scale in walnuts, because you're going to see, typically you'll see limb dieback, or you'll see it on the tops of the trees. You have to go up with a cherry picker to see that, but if it starts, it usually starts in the tops. And then for almonds, for scale, after petal fall, after the trees have leafed out in February and March. If you look at the levels of control we've seen, this is Gill's mealybug, which has been a problematic pest in pistachios. It's isolated in certain areas. Actually, I've got 2 trials here. They're both done in the Terabella region of California. And this looks at the incidence of Gill's mealybug at harvest per 10 fruit clusters. So you can see the SenStar basically knocked out the entire population. The applications were made first week in May. This is a different trial, same area geography, but a different field location. And this was the damage at harvest from the Gill's mealybug, meaning there was nuts that were infected at harvest. I attribute this to probably coverage. I think the first trial was better coverage than the second trial, but that's my opinion. And having good coverage really makes this product shine. I can't overemphasize that enough. Getting good coverage with SenStar will make you happy or make you not so happy. It's really about coverage. And again, I emphasize that speed does not kill. So keep in mind, the slower you go, the better coverage you get. And increasing volume and speeding up the tractor or sprayer is not a good compromise. It's about going slow with the adequate volume within that 1 to 400 gallon range and spraying with coverage in mind. So we talk about vegetables. SenStar is a very good tool for whiteflies and aphids. If we look at the key problem in most of our leafy vegetables, it's aphid. Down the desert areas, Arizona, it's probably the number one pest in the spring, and then in the fall maybe whitefly, but in the spring it's aphid. In the summer they complete their life cycle in 1 week, so it's a very rapid progression with this pest. So scouting, looking out there, checking things out. We know that damage from aphids could be, the feeding causes honeydew. The honeydew causes secondary problems, mold, sooty mold, and whatnot. Makes for a harvest that's not very good. Significantly reduces harvest potential. So there are several species of aphids that also vector these viruses, and so getting on them early is really key to controlling this pest. If you look at whiteflies, a similar problem, only they're more of a fall pest. Later summer, they need more heat to develop. One female can deposit 50 to 400 eggs. I mean, it's exponential, the growth that can happen. I remember as a young man first scouting cotton fields here in the San Joaquin Valley, where the whiteflies were so thick it was like fog. And with the advent of pyriproxyfen coming into the market back in the mid late 90s, that problem basically went away for several years, and I don't think it's really ever come back the way it used to be. So the pyriproxyfen component is very effective on whiteflies. All life stages that feed on the leaves, they excrete the honeydew, and then again that causes secondary problems. So again, getting them on them early is controlling them is better than going on after the fact. So for leafy vegetables, the rate a little bit different than the tree nuts and citrus, 8 to 10 ounces. You're going to control thrips and thrip larvae and the whiteflies and the aphids as well. A ground application, again, we want to have coverage in mind when we use this product. And again, sticker spreaders, you want to use something that is a spreader rather than a sticker, okay? You do want it to get into the plant. The spirotetramat component needs to enter the plant, and the pyriproxyfen needs to go translaminar from the top of the leaf to the bottom of the leaf, or from the bottom to the top, depending on where the spray deposition happens. Don't target, again, the same applies to this product as far as IPM, best management practices. You don't want to rotate with another group 23 or 7C product. 24-hour re-entry and a 14-day pre-harvest interval. As far as carrier volume, we look at the crop basically and see where it's at. If you've got baby lettuce out there or baby leafy greens, whatever it may be, you want to go with probably a lower volume. You don't need to put out a higher volume. So going with the lowest volume possible to get the highest concentration of product is, I think, the preferred way to go after it with coverage in mind. So that's for the individual person looking at that field. You don't want to seed more than 10 ounces per application, and you can't put more than 2 applications on per year, so it'd be 20 ounces total per acre per year. Or per season, rather, I'm sorry, not per year. Some of these crops will be multiple crops in a actual given year. So if you look at the use timing, basically it's for the most part all year round. And I would say in the Yuma area, it's probably all the way into January when you could be, especially for aphid. For bulb vegetables, for onion thrips, we target the larva. We do not control the adults, but we do knock up the larva pretty good. And that would be probably from March to about September. And then for leafy vegetables, for aphid and whitefly, all the way through from February to October. We're looking at, for Arizona vegetable use timing, as I said, January. It's basically that early spring season, January, February, March. After April, most of the produce is gone or being cycled out. And in the summertime, not much grown down there. So that's basically a spring and a fall windows of opportunity for these pests to emerge and be problematic. Whiteflies, of course, in the fall rather than the spring. If you look at the control, some of the results we've had back, this was actually done by over on the central coast of California, Salinas Valley. Fulfill, Movento, Versus, and Senstar, looking at the level of control. They all work pretty good, but Senstar leads the pack as far as controlling this pest. So I mean, this product has really impressed me. In the last 5 years, I've looked at it. I didn't even know what it was as a numbered compound, and I would never have thought that the two actives together would work in concert so well, but they do. There's a contact and a systemic coming together and giving it that 1-2 punch on multiple pests across multiple crops. If you look at the control of whiteflies, again, this was in the west side of the San Joaquin Valley in the fall. So we had whitefly pressure, looking at 3, 7, and 14 days after application, and you see the Senstar leading the pack again. The Movento alone, not significantly different than the Movento alone, but stands out by itself when you get out beyond 14 days. So people ask, how long does it last? Well, if you get good coverage on the initial application, it could basically last for almost the entire crop cycle. Additional pests or ideas, thrips are challenging. Everybody fights thrips. We are basically saying suppression on the thrips. We see a reduction in the nymphs, but the adults are still there. So I wouldn't count on complete utter devastation for thrip populations, but it does do a pretty good job when in combination, the two of them together. Coverage is absolutely essential. You got to get good coverage. And one of the problems with thrips is they hide in the crevices and cracks, and so you don't get the product to them. So getting good coverage can really enhance the level of kill you get on thrips. If we look at best management practices, Allison, we're going to let you take over here. Or?
Yep, that's fine. Thank you, Todd. All right, so I'm going to go over some more best management practices, and then pollinator profiles, and then touch on MRLs. So mixing with Senstar insecticide, since it's a new type of formulation, you'll want to go down into like this number 7, the suspension emulsions. So Todd has a really good acronym to talk about how to mix. What's your acronym, Todd?
It's the WHALE acronym, Wettables, W-A-L-E, Wettables, aqueous products, liquids, and then emulsifiables. So the Wettables will be your dry granules,
I really like that because I like that because it helps you break those out. Mm-hmm.
I stole that from the turf and ornamental industry. They have that. That's been around for quite a while. The WHALE, the way they mix, because they spray everything on a concentration per 100 gallons for the most part. And lower volume, they sometimes have problems. So using that WHALE acronym, WHALE technique, it basically alleviates any mixing problems you might have.
And then we did discuss a little bit about what type of adjuvants benefit Senstar to increase the translaminar and systemic movement. You want a penetrant type of adjuvant. Don't use stickers. We have tested internally at Valent crop oil concentrate, methylated seed oils, horticultural mineral oils, spreaders, and penetrants. And so far, we've had no phytotoxicity or mixing concerns or anything like that. So anything that can help move the products into the plant tissue is the adjuvant that we're looking for. So for pollinator profiles, a lot of the applications are after petal fall or some are after bloom timings. You never want to spray the bees directly, of course, but both spirotetramat and pyriproxyfen have very low toxicity to acute toxicity, contact, and oral to adult honeybees. And so it's not as bad as some of the other like neonics or things like that, but you still just want to be careful and continue your best management practices. For global MRLs, being as this is a mixture between the two products, you do have to check for both active ingredients. So if you go to BC Global's website and I typed in the top 10 exports for oranges, then the commodity of orange, and then the two different active ingredients. And then for pyriproxyfen and spirotetramat, it gives you a list of all the MRLs that are placed around the globe. And so since we talked about so many different crops today, I didn't include all of the crops, but if you ever have questions, you can always reach out to a Valent person or look these up on some of the provided websites. And so what we're going to do is wrap up, and then we'll move into some questions. So this summary slide is the value of SenStar. What we're proposing is that through this optimized suspo emulsion formulation, you won't have any tank mixing issues. It is properly formulated so the two active ingredients play nicely together and are in the ratios for the most effective use. Through the application, you get control of the targeted pest. All the life stages are impacted, including eggs and crawler stages. Both active ingredients lead to contact, translimiter, and systemic activity, and this helps the plant stay protected against any new invasion of any incoming insects. The translaminar movement, we did talk about good coverage. The translaminar and systemic does offer a little bit of slop factor in the coverage, but you still want to get in all those nooks and crannies because a lot of these insects, especially mealybugs, scales, love to hide in all those nooks and crannies. Get under the bark, get in all those little, if you're going to onions, they get down deep in there. So you do want to get good coverage and not just rely wholly on the translaminar activity. And then there's very selective control with minimal impact to beneficial insects and arthropods. When applying, there's minimal impact from both of these active ingredients. Todd, did you have anything else to add for our benefits, or should we hand it over for questions?
I think you covered it, Allison. I think we should go with questions.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, great. This is Larry Elward back as the moderator, and I'm going to ask Allison and Todd the questions. Great job on the presentation. Very informative. Thank you very much. And we do have plenty of questions, so let's get right to them. Allison, for you, right off the top here, why do you think there is such a complementary effect from these two active ingredients in SenStar above and beyond what the molecules already deliver on their own?
Well, I've used each individually on their own for years, and then when we combine them together, we just saw additive properties where pyriproxyfen or Esteem brands have always had a little bit of aphid activity on their own. We just didn't, promote it on the label. And then when put together, we just saw additional benefits. They both work complementary together as being on the softer side of the chemistries. They both are close. Insect growth regulator and spirotetramat is, in the production of the insect, things like that. So they complement each other in that regard. Also, Esteem, when you put them together, the Esteem starts acting first, and then that allows the time for the spirotetramat to get broken down inside the plant and give you even longer residual control.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Todd, a question for you. How long will SenStar control pests after application?
Well, Larry, the deal is if you get good coverage and you knock out the population for a pest like scale or a pest like mealybug, if they're all out and you have most of the population exposed to the spray coverage, that may be the application you need to use for the rest of the season. In a case where you've got new pests moving in, you might have to reapply. I would say at least 18 to 21 days on the leafy vegetables, the whiteflies and aphid pests. But if they move back in, you probably need to apply. The active ingredients, neither of them last that long. They're environmentally very friendly. However, the activity especially with the piproxafen, is dominated by that initial application, initial spray coverage.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Allison, any activity on nematodes?
In the Bayer agreement where we got the spirotetramat, they kept the nematicidal activity for their Movento brands. So SenStar is not labeled for nematodes. Okay.
Another question for you, Allison. Is SenStar tank mix compatible with other products?
We have as always, you should always check the compatibility with jar test if it's something new or potentially red flag. We have tried to do a lot of those red flag things to check for crop safety or any compatibility issues. And so far, we have not created any phytotoxicity or like mayonnaise cottage cheese in the tank. So far so good, but always be on the cautious side and do jar test.
Okay, thank you. Todd, can SenStar be used with pheromone/mating disruption?
Larry, absolutely. Especially for pests like mealybugs. Citrus mealybug is kind of an up-and-coming pest, as are the grape mealybug. So using pheromones in concert with SenStar is a very good approach to controlling that pest. And I say controlling the pest. When you're talking about mealybugs, you're basically managing the pest down to a population that's not economically disruptive. So yes, I would. In fact, Kent Dane from the University of California, Kearney Ag Center, he recommends using pheromones in concert with SenStar. There are no silver bullets. I wish they were. There aren't. SenStar is a very good tool. However, used in concert with pheromones, it can make the program look better.
Okay. Allison, when do you anticipate SenStar receiving registration on grapes and fruiting vegetables in California?
Oh, well, so California DPR, even though both active ingredients are registered in the state of California and currently being used, some crops were not immediately registered by California DPR. And so we have to conduct some pollinator studies before we can get those registrations. So we are in the process of doing that and as timely as we can.
Okay, great. Todd, how long does the pyrifloxacin last once it's been applied to a lettuce leaf?
to let it sleep. The half-life is about 5 to 7 days. So,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Depending on sunlight and where it's at on the leaf, what's in the bottom of the leaf or on top of the leaf. But yeah, about 5 to 7 days half-life.
Okay. Question, Allison, what's holding up CDPR from registering SenStar on grapes and fruiting vegetables? Aren't both active ingredients already registered in California for those uses?
Yes. Yes. As I said, DPR wants specific pollinator studies by crop. And so that is for grape and then one for fruiting vegetables. So that's what's holding it up.
Okay. Another question for you, Allison, excuse me. Can't I just tank mix Movento and Esteem NAC for the same effect?
You can. That's why we specifically formulated a specific mixture, is because the two active ingredients don't necessarily play nicely together. And so through SenStar being specifically made for that, it just has better abilities in this spray tank. So many people mix so many different things that having a formulation specifically made so that they're more compatible tends to help that.
Okay, thank you. Is there any potential for greenhouse use with SenStar?
I believe, greenhouse isn't always considered an agricultural use, and so I believe that is over in our Valent Professional products, probably under a different brand name. But I do not think that the Spire Tetramat from Bayer Component is, they didn't give us access to that part. So currently no SenStar in greenhouse.
Okay. Todd, does pyrifloxifene break down in high UV light or not so much?
Yes, it does break down in UV light, yeah.
Okay.
Breaks down, in the environment. You can get it, for example, if you put it on a tree crop and it gets in the interior of the tree, it's going to break down slower than if it's put on, say, a tomato crop or leafy vegetable crop where it's exposed, direct sunlight. So the more photolysis is, it's hard on everybody, it causes skin cancer and the clear coat on your cars to crack and deteriorate. And the same thing with pyriproxyfen. It has photo degradation or photolysis. The more shade you have, the longer it's going to last. But it's exposed to stuff on the outer canopy that's exposed to direct sunlight will break down a lot faster.
Okay. Thank you, Todd. Allison, we have a question here about the website. What is the website to look for global MRLs?
I like to use Bryant Christie. So that's Bryant Christie's with a CH. They have free access to a global MRL database, and you can, in the images that I showed in one of the slides, that was the website that I had used. And you just need to know the countries that you want to export to, the commodity that you're interested in, and then the pesticide active ingredients. And with those three pieces of information, you can submit a query and it pops up all the MRLs for the countries you requested.
Okay, excellent. Well, that concludes the questions. Allison, Todd, anything you want to add before we say goodbye here?
I wanted to add, I really like Todd's recommendation of the water-sensitive papers, and they're not cheap, but they're easily available on like your farm supply stores like Gempler's, things like that. They're great to staple to some leaves just to test how much coverage you're getting from your sprayer. So I think Todd's slides about that is really, really important, and I love water-sensitive paper.
Okay, great. Todd, any last thoughts?
You know, I've emphasized it 2 or 3 times during the slide presentation, but coverage is key. It really is key with this product. You've got two actives that work in concert. They are effective. They work. We've seen the results. The only time we haven't seen, you know, great results is when the coverage has been compromised. Sprayers are going too fast. You miss a spot. If you miss a spot with this product, it's not gonna be effective. So you've got to get really good coverage and go slow, and you'll be fine. And that's my 2 cents.
Excellent. Well said, Todd. Thank you. I want to thank everybody for attending the webinar, and I want to thank Valent USA for presenting it. Thanks again to Allison Walston and Todd Bergdahl for providing an excellent overview on this topic. Thanks again for joining us today, and have a great rest of the afternoon.